I'm very excited to introduce you to our panelists today. First up, joining us from Auburn University, Dr. Janaki Alavalapati is the Emmett F. Thompson Dean of the College of Forestry, Wildlife, and Environment. Prior to this position, Janaki held distinguished academic and leadership roles at Virginia Tech and the University of Florida. His doctorate is in forest research economics with master's degrees in rural sociology, botany, and forestry. And a fun fact, he has published over 200 publications. So, wow, Janaki, thank you for being here.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course, yeah. Dr. Dennis Becker is a professor and the dean of the College of Natural Resources at the University of Idaho. And Dennis's doctorate is in natural resource sciences. He was a postdoctorate fellow with the USDA Forest Service and a Fulbright fellow in Norway. His research focuses on forest policy and the social and economic impacts of bioenergy and natural resource management. So glad to have you with us, Dennis.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, and Dr. Tom DeLuca is the Dean of the College of Forestry at Oregon State University, where he is also the director of the Oregon Forest Research Laboratory and the professor of forest soils. Prior to this position, Tom held distinguished academic and leadership roles at the University of Montana, University of Washington, and Bangor University in the UK. His work as a forest soil scientist and ecosystem ecologist aims to advance sustainable land management and deepen the understanding of nutrient cycling, bioecology, and nitrogen fixation in temperate and boreal forests. And Tom has authored over 130 scientific publications. So welcome to Campfire Sessions, Tom.
Thanks, Kim, for having me.
Yeah. Okay, and joining us from the University of Montana is Dr. Libby Metcalf, who is the Dean of the W.A. Frank College of Forestry Conservation and the Joel Meyer Distinguished Professor. She earned her doctorate at Pennsylvania State University with a focus on outdoor recreation management issues, human-wildlife interaction, and understanding complex social ecological systems. Libby's theoretical approach is based in social psychology and often includes examination of attitudes, values, and beliefs. Libby, it's great to have you with us today.
Thank you, Kim.
Yeah. And lastly, Todd Petty is the Dean of the Warnell School of Forestry and Natural Resources at the University of Georgia. And before joining UGA, Todd led Clemson's Department of Forestry and Environmental Conservation, where he oversaw major growth in their enrollment and research funding. Todd spent over 2 decades at West Virginia University, focusing on water quality, watershed science, and climate resilient river systems in Appalachia, and also served as Associate Dean for Academic Affairs. Todd, it's always a pleasure to see you. Thanks for being here.
Glad to be here.
Awesome. Okay. Well, now that we have all of you up on the screen, I want to go ahead and let's just dive right in. Let's get this fire started. There's so much to cover. And so I'm going to kick things off a little bit differently than we typically do and throw this one out to the full group. So in 90 seconds or less, as we approach this fall semester, and some of you guys may have already started or it's right around the corner, tell me, what's your biggest pain point approaching the new school year? What keeps you up at night? Janaki, why don't you kick us off?
Well, sure, absolutely. Well, I'm not sure if it is a pain point, but we're quite excited actually to welcome our new students and also a welcome back to our previous students as well. But one of the things administratively, we have challenged at Auburn universities. Our university provides flexibility for students. Once they come here the first time, they have an opportunity to move across majors. So that way, we have to wait and see, once we get to first week or second week, how many are going to be out of these majors, and how many are going to be into the college. So that makes some kind of administrative challenges in terms of lining up more vehicles, more TAs, more the lab computers and those kinds of things. But other than that one, we're quite excited.
Got it. Okay.
Well,
Dennis, you're up. Oh,
Well, I'll tell you, the elephant in the room is what's going to happen at the federal level and how that manifests at the state level in terms of research funding and just funding for higher education. We're all dealing with this, and I would say I often say that we're doing quite well if we would just be left alone. But of course, that's not how this works, and we do need to be accountable for the taxpayer dollars that helps support all of our programs. But the political winds are challenging right now for higher education, and the work that we do is important and legitimate, and yet there's a lot of there's a lot of targets on our backs, and so what's keeping me up right now is will the budget be what we thought the budget was going to be, or will it be reduced? So.
good point. Libby?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I just echo what a little bit of what Dennis is talking about. Our students are excited to be here, and they're excited to look for their careers in federal jobs. And part of this webinar, we're going to be thinking a lot about how do we provide alternative opportunities for these students, right? How do we think about private sector jobs? And so it's some of the work we have to do this year is really thinking about how do we package our education system? How do we package what we're selling at our institutions in a way that students want to be part of it? And so we're really excited to work with our students and to really think about how do we think about the value of higher education, given all of the challenges that we're facing with our federal government right now.
Thank you. Todd?
Sure, yeah. So I think what you'll hear from everybody is a mixture of excitement. We're always excited to get back to the new semester and the new year, and it's one of the reasons we do the job that we do. So we have that, and then we couple that with, I think, if you boil things down to one word, it's uncertainty, and then a second word related to that is anxiety. Certainly, we see this mostly in our grad students, and young professionals. Certainly something you've devoted the last several years of your life to. All of a sudden, the landscape changes, and it creates an enormous amount of anxiety. I think the message that we have for folks is that, look, this is to Dennis's point. We do very important things, very exciting things, very interesting things. That didn't change overnight. But the landscape has changed, and we'll just have to adjust to that as we can. And it won't be smooth, but it's our job to make those adjustments, and that's what we'll do.
Got it. And Tom?
Great, thanks, Kim. Yeah, I would echo what has been said already, that as far as pain points of the uncertainty with regard to for our students that are headed into or thinking they were headed into the federal workforce or just into the sector in general, there is some level of uncertainty out there. But in terms of from a start of the autumn quarter, we're on a quarter system here at Oregon State. We still have almost a month to go, or more than a month to go. So we're still in full steam ahead on summer, and our students are out working in the fields. And fortunately, not a very heavy fire season so far this year. But one of our pain points is literally growth. We have a 9% growth last year in the college and 10% this year, and just meeting that demand. So enrollment surge and having to adjust class sizes and sections and that type of thing. So that's a good pain point, but it is a challenge for us. We also have at the university level some changes in new student orientation and onboarding, and so our student services staff is scrambling to adjust to this new schedule. And but we have an outstanding group, 8 advisors and 2 career support staff and an assistant dean of student success that are making that transition for our students as smooth as possible.
Got it. Yeah. Well, thank y'all for jumping in and getting this fire started. I think what we'll find out is that a lot of the things you mentioned, that you guys mentioned, are themes that are going to come up often throughout the conversation today, over and over. So thank you for touching and starting us off on those. So start to dig into the conversation deeper, I first want to take a look back at our history as far as forest graduate studies and programs go. I have to imagine this space and the curriculum and the offerings look different or quite different than what they did even 20, 30 years ago. So I want to talk about like how things have evolved across the board. What has changed or what's been the same, and what stayed the same or changed for better or for worse. And Todd, I'd like you to go ahead and kick us off there if you can, and just give us your thoughts on it. I know that you've seen some change throughout your time in the industry and in the academic space. So why don't you take this one and go first?
Sure. Well, I think, each of our institutions and departments and colleges and the like are all a little bit different. So we probably each have a different sort of view on this, and changes have been a little different for each of our groups. In a big picture sense, if you go back 20, 30 years, a lot of programs that have forestry, mixed with wildlife or wildlife and fisheries and recreation and the like, going back 20 or 30 years, those might not have been very well integrated. It might have come from different parts of campus, and then they were mashed together. And some of the culture shock of that over the course of my career, at least, I think you've seen a more full or a fuller integration of those disciplines. So traditional forestry and forest timber markets merging with broader sort of diverse stakeholder management. And I think, we've seen a maturation of that integration over time. Also think we've seen, if you go back 20 or 30 years, there was more of a dichotomy between so-called preservation and utilization of our forest resources. And again, I think over time we've seen that dichotomy blur as we come into, hands-off versus active management. I think we're seeing that take something like wildfire, the recognition that we need to be active managers in order to mitigate wildfires over the course of the landscape. So I think we're, over this 20 years, and I see this as very positive, right? This integration of thought and integration of how we interact with various parts of our disciplines. And then I think we'll talk about it a little later, and that's the topic of technology. Certainly every discipline has undergone technological innovation, and I think we're seeing that in forestry and natural resources fields. It started, well, I don't want to say when things started, but certainly how we use GIS has changed dramatically. How we use remote sensing and machine learning has changed dramatically, and I think we're in this phase of trying to figure out how generative AI will change how we operate and how we teach, how we train the next generation. So those are the big changes that I can point out most simply. But thank you. That's a great question.
Yeah, and I have to imagine, to your point, and you talked about some of the integration, but that the course offerings itself that have gone into the graduate studies have changed and evolved a lot. Does anybody want to chime in there as far as like what that looks like, and maybe what you've seen or how you've seen those change as far as what the classes you're even offering or the content?
Yeah, Kim, I can pop in and talk a little bit about, there's some core concepts that are just going to span time, right? We're going to have a silviculture class. We're going to have a physical geography class. There's just some stuff that we're going to continue to see, and we don't see a lot of variation in how those concepts are kind of tried and true. But what we're also seeing is these kind of innovative classes stacking on top of those. And that's really what I think Todd was getting at, is this integration. So we might have a collaborative conservation class, or we might have a class focused on social ecological systems. And so we're seeing these kind of other courses wrap around our core curriculum in a way to equip our students to be able to go out into the real world and be able to solve really practical challenges that are out there. I think the other thing I want to note is that a lot of our curriculums are evolving as well in terms of how many credits we offer, because we know our students want to come here and they want to specialize in forestry or wildlife or recreation, but then they want to add something on top of that. And so we have these very magical students who take forestry on and then take a second major in dance or business. And so we're trying to create that space as well in our curriculum to allow students to really become the whole self that they want to be.
Wow, interesting. Good. Anything else anybody want to contribute to that part of the discussion?
Well, Kim, one of the, well, just, to add a little bit more to what Todd said, there's some kind of, land ownership changes also are driving a lot of different things. For example, until 1990s, most of the private land was in the hands of industrial private landowners, but that has changed towards the institutional land ownership. So that has put forest lands more a kind of liquid assets. So what does that mean to forestry curriculum? One thing I have to say boldly is, whatever the changes are happening, whether it is societal changes or ownership changes or technological changes, forestry schools or institutions are so resilient. We try hard to align our programs to suit those conditions, because those changes are going to be continuous, and we have to align our programs, otherwise we will be obsolete. If you look at all the way from 1950s, when timber famine was there, entire focus was on timber production. But by 1990s, we have this whole bunch of multidisciplinary programs, beyond timber production. Now, because of the technological advancement, more and more colleges are launching exclusively geospatial informatics bachelor's degrees, leave alone the classes. Mm-hmm. So those kinds of changes are going to be continuous as a result of societal ownership changes and technological changes.
Right, they're directly impacting what you offer. Yeah, that's a great point. And I think that theme of change, I'm glad you brought that up, because we're going to talk about that a lot. Change is going to be constant, and we're going to hit on that throughout everything that we talk about here. So thank you, Janaki. Okay, so let's pull up our first poll question really quick and take a look at that if we can. So I think it's going to help us segue into our next topic too. Do you think, and go ahead and, submit your answer if you haven't already, but do you think graduates entering the workforce lack any specific skills? And communication lab and or field skills, technology or other, and feel free to put in the chat there whatever your other may be, if you have that. But it looks like an overwhelming amount of our audience is saying that they're entering with a lack of communication skills. So panelists, what do you think about that? Give me your feedback on this. And then I see like some hand raising emojis going up too in response to that. So what's up with these graduate students and the communication or lack thereof?
Well, I'll go ahead and kick this one off, Kim, and just say that, communication skills are absolutely key to the success of our students, graduate students and undergraduates. And yet we tend to focus on technical skills. And survey after survey have shown that what our employers really want out of our people are, sound technical skills, sound field and laboratory skills, but they have to be good communicators, both written communication and oral communication. And so over time, we have tried to really enhance that capacity within our curriculum and within the college. But This isn't anything new. The poll is showing exactly what we know. Our students need to have those communication skills and personal engagement skills really strong to be successable.
Yeah, I imagine the answer is the same across most disciplines, right? I mean, that's not changed at all every time. That's one of the things, when we talk about change, that's one of the things that's remained the same. Communication is key to all of it. Anybody else have thoughts on that?
I'd be surprised if it wasn't the top,
Yeah.
For the reasons said, but we're also increasingly complex in how we think about questions related to forestry and natural resources, and the ability to integrate thought across those disciplines is really critical, but it's also the ability to communicate that thought and to communicate the questions that we have, or to communicate potential solutions, and not only certainly with landowners, but also just in our daily work life. These students are going into a workplace, dynamic workplace settings, and their ability to navigate interpersonal communications, interpersonal conflict is critical. And yet, I would say sort of where I struggle when I look at my own teenagers, connected to their devices, and they're more comfortable with certain styles of communication or different communication than maybe those of us that are on this panel, and how we grew up and what was expected of us in school. And so that's a challenge we have in trying to reach these students and help them to, I would say, engage in the old ways of communication is still very important. I sound like an old guy now, but this is something that it's always on our mind.
Yeah, gotcha. Awesome. Thank you for that. Okay. So that brings us into our next topic. Colleges and universities, again, are about to start fall semesters in the coming week. So let's move into the topic of enrollment and recruitment. So does anybody want to share or expand on your thoughts about how things are going at your schools and departments? I know, Tom, you mentioned a little bit about yours and the challenges that you faced, and that was kind of one of your pain points in a good and a bad way going into that. But I want to know, again, like, where or how have you guys had to pivot with the challenges that have come about? And then also just like enrollment trends across the board as far as academics and colleges and universities with everything that's been going on. So anybody feel free to jump in or take it if you'd like.
I can speak for, from Auburn University perspective, our college. For the past couple of years, our applications have doubled, but the yield is going to be the same for us because for the past 2 years, our board of trustees at Auburn University put a kind of informal cap on undergraduate enrollment. So we can take more than X number of undergraduates for the university. So as a result, we have actually challenges, particularly with the growth of a lot of forest industry significance in Auburn. We're unable to, take mostly the in-state students, but they have to go to out of state. So, that is one of our challenges actually. Not having any under enrollment or anything. So we are kind of trying to work with upper administration to get some flexibility so that we can get a few more in-state students who are desperately wanted to come to our forestry programs. But other than that one, so far Auburn University is holding very well in terms of applicants and interest to join Auburn University.
Great.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off that because, of course, we at UGA has been going through this filter a while. And I think it's important to think through this, particularly at our land grants, which each of us are. So there's two headwinds I think that we face, at least in the Southeast and in the schools that we're at. One is the urbanization of our student body, and so so we're getting a lot of students coming in that don't necessarily have a connection to forests, direct connection to forests and wildlife like historically they might have, which is no big deal. They're great students and they make great fits. But then when you couple that with what I call an enrollment sieve, So to Joniki's point, where you've got 60,000 applicants, but the school is only going to grow less than 1%. So 15% of the applicants are being accepted, and the cross section of those students is not necessarily a cross section that's that knows going in that they want to go into forestry. So that is a huge headwind, I think, that we face, and it's increasingly across across universities across the nation. And you'd think that we hear all about the demographic cliff and all of this and all the headwinds that universities are facing for enrollment, and they are, but most of our universities here are not facing those same problems, but programs like ours are, just by the nature of how we're enrolling now. And I think it's worth a conversation to think about how to deal with that, because it is a real an important effect.
Got it. Good point. Thank you, Todd. Anybody else?
I'd just like to mention a couple other things. About 56% of our students are transfer students, so that creates an interesting aspect of our enrollment. We're seeing this growth that I mentioned earlier of about 10% increase coming this autumn, and the university has been experiencing growth. I think it's the only R1 institution that has consistently grown for the last 28 years, and it'll be 29 years as of this year. So we've had good growth at the university, even through periods of adversity. But sort of similar to what Janaki had mentioned, the university has a requirement of all first-year students have to live on campus. And so that puts us in a box where we can only accept a certain amount of students into as first-time full-time freshmen for on-campus. So a big place where we've had growth is actually online. We didn't talk about online curricula in the last in the last section, but that's become an increasingly important part of our student body. But back to the transfer students, just to say that we have this a great deal of growth in the College of Forestry because students get into the university. Perhaps they haven't decided on a major yet, or they started in a different major and then transfer over into the college as they learn about our program and learn about what we do. Because as Todd suggested, more and more of our students come into the university not knowing what forestry is or what a career in forestry is. And so it's an eye-opener to them when they take a course or they happen to see what we offer here in the College of Forestry and they transfer in. So it's interesting, a large percentage of our students are transfer students.
Kim, I think it's worth noting that, Tom and Todd and Janaki are at these really large institutions that have kind of major populaces around them. Dennis and myself, we're in kind of more rural states, right? And so Montana's not very big in terms of our population. And so we have kind of a little bit of a different trend where our students find us pretty quickly. And so a lot of the students come to because they do want a career in natural resources and forestry and all the alike disciplines. And so we do a really good job of kind of marketing what we do to our residents of the state of Montana. And I always say University of Montana is one of the best values out there if you're an in-state student. It's one of the lowest tuition rates. And so we've always, so we kind of have a little bit of flip dynamic at some of our rural universities.
That's a good point. Yeah. Awesome.
Oh, I had it much easier. Sorry. I had it much easier when I was at WVU recruiting students. Yeah. Same. Yeah. Everybody lives in a forest.
Yeah.
Very good. Interesting points. Awesome. Good stuff. Well, real quick, let's do a quick giveaway before we move on to our next question. If we can hit our giveaway tab there. I wonder, let's see. All right. Well, here, let me do it. All right. We are spinning for Campfire t-shirts. We've got 3 winners. Let's see. Okay, Jesse Turner and Kevin Wood. Okay, guys, we will contact you afterwards to get those out to you and get your information. Congratulations, you got a fun t-shirt coming your way. Okay, so let's go into technology. I know that we talked about this and touched on it as we talked about the evolution of the curriculum and how things have evolved and changed. And what we're offering so we know it plays a big role in shaping the courses and the content, but the industry as a whole and obviously just our day-to-day lives. So I want to get into the specifics a little more about how it's influencing higher learning in forestry and natural resources. So for example, as far as like the students and the enrollment that we were just talking about, I'm curious if they're making enrollment or even course selection decisions based on technology usage or availability in certain classes. Is today's technical curriculum easy for them to learn, you think, and absorb by the students? And then on the flip side, is it easy or do you feel like difficult or challenging for instructors to grasp and teach? I know it's kind of like a lot of questions, but I'm curious about it from the student's perspective and then the instructor perspective as well, because it's happening and changing so fast. So for me, like it would be a lot to try to adapt to and pick up. What are you guys seeing or hearing out there from both ends as far as technology and its influence?
I'll take a first stab at this one, and I'll start by even expanding that even further to our to the employers of these students. There's certainly an expectation from companies that they arrive with certain technical skills, and I'll just mention a couple of them very specifically. So the ability to use remote sensing LiDAR to measure forests and natural resource landscapes, not just forests, but other landscapes as well, range, water, sheds, so forth, for various business purposes. Those skills, we've taught those in our programs for a long time, but they're evolving quite rapidly now. Or the operationalization of that technology is evolving quite rapidly right now. We've been teaching remote sensing and other LiDAR and other remote sensing tools for decades. That's not new. But the integration of that technology into the practice of forestry for landowners, for large industrial landowners and non-industrial landowners alike, that part is changing, and so there's an expectation that our students have those skills. Our ability to offer those, I would say we've always been strong, and our faculty have evolved, and at least I've not seen any challenge with them sort of uptake with that technology. In fact, mostly what we're seeing is it's an interesting dichotomy. I'd be curious what the other deans think about this or what they've experienced, but you have it at the higher end leadership level of these companies. They want that technology to be used in their businesses. But you have a lot of field foresters, techs on the ground who maybe graduated a decade ago, 2 decades ago, who don't have those skills, or even 5 years ago, who maybe don't have those skills. And so LiDAR, for instance, and Geiger is evolving so rapidly that even students that are graduating today, some of their skills will be obsolete within a year or two. And so what we're finding is this really interesting dynamic of recent graduates, really sort of selling the new technology to old graduates, or out in the field to the dirt foresters who didn't grow up with some of this. Dirt foresters way back when, not that long ago. you walk out to a forest, you hug it with a tape measure, you measure it, you do this and sample plots. Now we're talking about, at least here at the University of Idaho, we're measuring millions of acres a full tree census with LiDAR faster than what we can, and cheaper than what we could do with sort of the old techniques. But those are very different tree lists, very different statistics that are used to apply that information to, say, silviculture practices. And so what we're finding is that we need to also upskill the existing workforce, but also then allow our foresters to understand how, both ways of doing that work, because they're just very different. And maybe I guess I will stop there, because I'm curious sort of what the other deans are sort of experiencing, not just in that space, but across the board.
Kim, from our perspective, actually, there are two approaches. I think Dennis laid out very well in terms of the technological implications for our curriculum and also to the industry as well. This actually 2025 February, our advisory council actually unanimously recommended that, hey, you need to factor some GIS courses as a kind of required courses, not optional courses. Even if SAF requirement is not there into forestry and wildlife programs and other. That is one type of approach. We wanted to make sure some GIS expertise is there to all our students, no matter which major they are pursuing within the college, natural resources, wildlife, or this. But some people are really passionate about advancing their learning opportunities in geospatial database management and those things. So we have created about 4 or 5 years ago geospatial and informatics program, and they actually major it in that program. So which is essentially directly they can get into bigger companies or something to advance geospatial technologies for the firm, as opposed to, of course, the basic understanding of all the details that Dennis mentioned. Every student within the college, they get it.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, I would just piggyback on some of the things that Dennis and Janaki have shared, and say that our industry partners are expecting our students to come out prepared and to have these skills. And yet, as Dennis said, we have lots of people out in the that are working in the woods that or at mills that have potentially not been exposed to these new technologies that are being taught at forestry programs around the nation today. And so that's where, again, I'll just say online education has a really significant role to play. We are offering more certificates, sort of just a collection of courses that are available online for students to advance those technological skills. And importantly, we just put a couple of other degree programs online just recently, and one is a professional science master's, or an online professional master's in wood science and engineering. And the idea there being that a lot of people come into the wood products industry from potentially an MBA or from a business administration background, or a different field, and then they want to pick up those some understanding, a better understanding of wood science or wood products. And here's this remote degree that you can take from without having to go back to university in a sort of remote location like Corvallis. So the online degrees just make those types of things possible to top up that technological know-how that you might not have gotten at that time in your degree, or if you're just taking an extension of your undergraduate degree and wanting to add those technological skills.
Got it. Awesome. Thank you, guys. I appreciate that. I want to go over to Libby. I thought your background, Libby, might be of particular interest to a lot of folks on the session today who I know work in land management from an outdoor recreational standpoint. Can you share a little bit about the work and research that you've done related to recreation?
Yeah, thanks, Kim. I think when I talk about my research, I'm often known as the person who studies women in hunting, and so that's kind of my niche and my shtick. And so it fits really well here in the state of Montana, right? And so we have a big hunting is very much part of our culture here. It's much like some of the other states that are part of this panel today. But what we've been really interested in is kind of how do we engage with our landowners, how do we engage with our state, and how do we engage with our hunters to ensure that the opportunities that they want exist on the landscape. And this is a really nice tie-in to our students, right? And so our students also like to study these things. When you start telling them they can get some college credit for learning a little bit about hunting, they're really jazzed to do that. And so, we've had a really nice time of just kind of bringing our students out with us to work with landowners on the ground to understand what type of opportunities they have to offer for recreation. And this comes in a lot of different ways. It might be hunting, but we're also seeing a lot of landowners open their land up for other uses. So we see kind of the Airbnb fad happening on private lands, right? Where you can rent someone's ranch for your own personal kind of weekend. We're seeing folks open up their lands for all types of wildlife viewing and different types of foraging. And so I imagine that these trends exist in other places and are going to continue to grow and thrive as we move on into kind of this Uber style kind of economy.
Yeah, awesome. And it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but your work has been predominantly based in the U.S. West. And for the most part, I think everyone has like a general understanding of the differences in recreational leasing in the West versus the East or the rest of the country. But you mentioned to me before about the differences in how the state governments in the West handle rec leasing. And I thought that was interesting. Can you talk to us about that or expand on that?
Yeah, we have our state agency has this program called block management. It's really if you study hunting management, you'll know block management. And it's a cooperative agreement with a landowner. So landowners can open up access to their land for hunters to come onto it. And the state manages it, and there's all these different dials a landowner can choose. They can decide which days a hunter can go on their property, which areas, what type of tool they want to bring with them. And so it's been a really impactful process for the state of Montana, and it opens up a ton of private land to hunters to access that. And I think if you don't know about it, it's worth it kind of poking around and looking at it.
And it's called, what was that called again?
Block management.
Block management for you guys if you're taking notes. So I want to then bring in the rest of the panel. Again, you guys are coming in from different corners of the country. How does that compare then to how the governments or jurisdictions in your areas are approaching or their attitudes toward recreational leasing? Or do you have any thoughts to add to Libby's points?
Recreation, at least in the Western U.S., just overran us during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
We thought we were ready, but we weren't. And in our programs,
bad way, I'm guessing, like is double-edged sword.
Yeah, it exploded, way more than doubled, and so just trespassing, waste of all sorts. Impacts, resource impacts. It really brought to the fore this question about access, especially in the Western U.S. It's an issue all over the country. It manifests differently, but in the Western U.S., where you have such extensive public lands, but also interspersed with lots of private lands, who gets to access certain lands for what purposes? Is a fundamental question to this recreation issue. If you want to create some conflict quickly, just put a gate up on a public road, or shut down a traditional use area. It might even be on private land that has historically been open to the public. And so, you do something like that, you're going to be on the front page of the paper in about 2 minutes, at least in this part of the country. So, all to say is that these are questions that our students, whether they're in forestry or other natural resource programs, they need to be aware of it and understand how those dynamics and what the expectations of the public are.
Thank you, Dennis.
Yeah, maybe an interesting twist on this is, our research forest is right connected to the town or the city of Corvallis. It's literally 15 minutes from campus to our research forest. We have our research forest open for public use. We have probably 200,000 visitors a year on the forest. The parking lots are always full, and yet it's a research forest, and people seem to forget that it exists. It's a working forest with a range of forest management treatments being applied across the forest. It's a living laboratory for our students, but it also is that opportunity to show that forestry is wholly compatible with recreational uses. It's one of the only large-scale land uses that is. If we think about agriculture, most people aren't out recreating in a cornfield that's actively being managed for corn production, or a gravel pit that's being actively managed. You're not going to recreate there until it fills in with water. You might go swimming in it, but our forests are perfect environments for people to recreate and to reconnect with nature in a way that you wouldn't be able to otherwise. So that access is super important, and we like to demonstrate that with our research forest.
Kim, I would like to share two specific things that we are very proud at Auburn University. Is our college has got 123 acres of land just 4 miles away from our college, donated by a gracious donor. And that particular thing is the hub for environmental, outdoor education, recreation, whatnot. And it is attracting nearly 40,000 plus children, youth, and adults. And it is round the clock, it is open, no gates, nothing. We have a nature preschool that we are operating the college side from 2.5 years all the way to 7 to 8 years old. We just started with one section. Now we expanded into 8 sections. There is a huge waiting list because parents wanted to drop the children, because rain or shine, those children would be outdoors learning nature. So that is one. The second one is a few years ago, we launched a unique undergraduate major called Wildlife Enterprise Management. It's not typical wildlife ecology management, but this one is 50% wildlife courses, in terms of habitat management, 25% courses from hospitality and tourism, and 25% from business. Just we launched, the next year we got 130 students into the program. These are essentially how to set up some kind of businesses, hospitality events surrounding hunting and fishing and other activities. The program is going very, very well.
Wow, yeah, that's smart. It's interesting. I love that. You guys, y'all touched on, like, I think it was Tom, the forest labs and things going on like that. I want to transition into like research studies and research projects. Does anybody have any particular current or maybe some recent research projects that you guys can give us like a quick summary on or share that you've worked on that would be of interest?
Yeah, well, I don't necessarily have a single large anything to share. Certainly, I think something that's characteristic of each of our institutions is the diversity of projects that are going on, all the way from recreational development on forest lands and human dimensions, all the way to the economics of a quail plantation, to lemon shark nurseries expanding as a result of climate change. That full range of things at each of our schools. I think that's one of the most amazing things about forestry and natural resources schools around the nation is just how interesting and diverse the research is. One of the things I think is that we're proud of here at Warnell that I think makes us resilient to some of the disruptions that are occurring, and these exist across the country, are our cooperatives that are either with companies or a combination of companies and agencies. So we have our Center for Forest Business that has a lot of, Janaki mentioned the TIMOs, or the various investment consortiums in forest lands. And then we have our Plantation Management Research Cooperative, and then our Southern Pine Health Cooperative. And these are, true cooperatives that identify research priorities and are used to leverage for federal dollars when those are expanding, and then used to consolidate to more business dollars or private dollars when that is what is the dominant investment. So, I think each of us, from the standpoint of the work that we do, we have to be adaptive in that way and responsive to the disciplines that we work in.
Gotcha. Awesome.
Can
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Can I piggyback on that just really briefly? Kim, thank you. Yeah, I just would echo what Todd said about the importance of the co-ops, and we have actually a total of 11 research co-ops that are here at Oregon State University. Everything from tree improvement co-op to a mass timber co-op that was just formed this last year. And speaking of, and they are a really unique model, and I think they're going to be a useful model as we move into this new period where federal research dollars are contracting, and that important connection between private industry, agency, university, and NGOs through those cooperatives really open up new and different approaches to getting that work done, and not just strictly relying on federal research dollars. But I wanted to mention one project in particular that was funded a couple of years ago and relates to it's a collaboration between the university here on campus, which is called the Tallwood Design Institute. It's a mass timber innovation collaboration between Oregon State University College of Forestry, College of Engineering, and the University of Oregon's School of Architecture and the College of Design. And that group has been successful in securing funding for really innovative work in the affordable housing space using mass timber construction and creating that from low value timber that is accessed in fuel reduction projects in high fire prone areas. And so it's a really unique collaboration with a range of partners that I won't go into detail on, but just emphasize that this Tallwood Design Institute was identified by the Department of Commerce as one of 31 tech hubs in the United States. And most of the tech hubs are things like quantum computing and AI, and here's this bizarre mass timber tech hub. But it's so fitting because mass timber really is a high-tech innovation, and it opens up a world of opportunities for our architects to do something really unique with a carbon neutral, building material that is fully renewable. And I'll be quiet for a moment.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. And I see Livia's put some information about block management in the chat window there. So Tom, if you have a link or something that you want to share on that project, please feel free to share that, and that goes for anybody else on the panel on any of the points that you've brought up. If you'd like to share anything, please add it. Real quick, let's do another giveaway while we're at it. Let me pull this up real quick and get this going. We have got this beautiful pickleball set here that one lucky winner is gonna get. And that is Lauren. So we will contact you afterwards to get that out to you. Congratulations. Okay, I know that we're getting close, and so this next topic or area I think is going to spur a lot of questions or things. So we're going to crank up the heat a little bit, and I want to make sure that we have plenty of time to get the audience questions in also. So I want to just jump right in. Let's talk about funding. And again, we touched on it a little bit in the fire starter and brought it up. But funding, money, you know, it's always going to be a hot topic, whether it's our industry or any other industry that we're talking about. And like we've mentioned, and as everyone is well aware, you know, there's been recent rollbacks of federal investments and support, certainly in forestry, environmental science, climate action, natural resources, ag, and then higher education support across the board. So I've seen a lot of different figures, but most all of them showing the latest proposed budget cuts totaling well into the multi-billion-dollar mark for the USDA and the agencies that fall under it. So relevant to this conversation, some of the most affected agencies are the ones responsible for forestry and conservation, as well as education and research. And from what I'm gathering, these cuts are coming in the form of budget reductions, freezes, project eliminations, staffing cuts, as well as cuts to grant scholarships and diversity initiatives. So I want to know what you guys are experiencing. What's going on from your perspective? Have these cuts or related obstacles trickled down to your schools or departments? Are you guys starting to feel the effects, or what's going on? What's been your experience? Feel free to jump in.
Kim, I think Dennis laid out right in the beginning kind of elephant in the room characterization. I think, you know, the funding, what the current situation as opposed to until December is one thing, but going forward, what kind of situation is going to be? This uncertainty is really hard. I think Todd laid out very well in terms of complexities dealing with uncertainty. So most of our younger faculty members who have submitted tons of proposals, they're just standing there, status quo, no reviews. So essentially, those people are coming to me, okay, Dr. A, what should we be doing next year when we come for annual evaluations? Even when our proposals are not being reviewed. See, those kinds of things, we don't have answers yet. That is number one challenge. But I do want it to go back even before December. So in forestry specifically, because of the land ownership changes, societal preference changes, the conventional forestry, like silviculture, forest operations, so to speak, dirt forestry, opportunities for any research funding has plummeted significantly in the past few decades. And what is the implication of that one? The supply of faculty for silviculture operations is pretty much almost, it is coming to zero these days. It's the PhD things, because there is no PhD production in silviculture forest operations. For example, recently we advertised silviculture positions. Twice we had to advertise and only 4 applications showed up. But if you focus on ecology and other areas, you get tons of applications. So there are some challenges are there going forward. The future of forestry, Forest Service, SAF, Society of American Forest, they have to do something, to these conventional dirt forestry areas.
Thank you, John.
I could share some of our experiences over the last several months. This spring we had a number of grants terminated. that directly affected our faculty and in turn directly affected graduate students. We lost funding for numerous graduate students through those terminations, and then rescission of funding of another large project that is a multi-institutional and U.S. Forest Service project on fire and water security, drinking water security, and never really understood why that the funding for that would have been terminated, but huge impact on what's a really outstanding research program. And then in addition to those, those terminations and funding rescission is the impact to the U.S. Forest Service research enterprise and the consolidation of the research enterprise to one primary station located in Fort Collins, when we have otherwise have 9 regional centers that are, for example, Pacific Northwest here in Portland, and here in Corvallis, or the Region 1, Region 1 in Missoula. They are going to retain the Fire Sciences Lab in Missoula, but these forest ecosystems are very different as we go from the southeast to the northeast to the north central to the northwest, and the regional centers had a reason for existing, and they created really important collaborations between the Forest Service and the universities that are regionally located as well. And so it remains to see what sort of impact that's going to have on total research expenditures from the Forest Service, but it certainly will be a significant reduction. And then the loss of that, of those regional collaborations, is going to be really significant. And yet we don't really have clarity yet on what that looks like.
Yeah, interesting. And again, there's a lot of facts and figures rolling around, but I think, with some of the recent weather events that have happened, we've been hearing that some of those consolidations or closures have been happening with the National Weather Service agency, and whether or not, those closures are affected or contributed to some of the communication or lack thereof happening, to be determined. But we also know, agencies like NOAA or the Weather Service, their funding was cut by like 26%, NASA even 47%, and the Science Foundation is rating like over a 50% cut. So definitely, I think a lot of folks are feeling it. I want to talk about funding or cuts in the form of like grants and scholarship and financial aid. Does anybody have thoughts or experience, or can you talk to us about what's going on there, or anything you're hearing?
Maybe I'll maybe expand that a little bit, or think about it in an expansive way. Our partners, whether they're companies, private industry, or just private individuals, what I'm experiencing, and I think a lot of us, the way we're experiencing enrollment growth, I think a lot of us are also experiencing growth in donations and gifts from various private organizations and individuals. That has helped to pick up some of the slack, or at least concern of the slack that might be forthcoming through further federal cuts. So that's all good. I guess where I want to be more expansive is in thinking about sort of the evolution of where we're at right now. I mean, we know that our relationships and our funding from federal organizations may change, or it is changing, and that we're seeing that even sort of the Doge effect that's coming down into individual states. Like Idaho, certainly we will have our Doge effects and our own sort of efforts related to that here. Those are going to happen. This is an evolution, and so I want to go all the way back to a couple of decades ago. there's a really interesting U.S. endowment report on sort of investments in university research or just forestry research in general. Historically, was primarily from private industry. Now, for tax purposes, a lot of other reasons, that really has declined dramatically in the last couple decades, to the point where it's just really just a small percentage of what historically private industry's role was in the work that we do, which has changed our partnerships and our relationships. I think we're at a point now, we were at this point before the current cuts in federal funding, where we see both the need to diversify, but also a need to work more closely with private industry to establish or reestablish some of those historic partnerships in this research space. I think this is just speeding that up in terms of what's happening at the federal government level and maybe at the state level, like here, where even more we're going to have to rely on private partnerships to really advance some of that research. That research is still absolutely fundamental, not just to the Forest Service, but to private landowners. And so it still needs to get done. There's many questions relates to sort of the quality and health of our forests and natural resources that we can't ignore those. And so I think about it in terms of evolution. It is a challenging time right now, and it's really challenging for those students and faculty who are losing funding. But we have to be forward thinking and working together and thinking about what those new partnerships might look like. Even at the federal level, several of us actually on the panel here are working together in conversations with how to envision a future research enterprise in partnership with the federal government and the U.S. Forest Service.
Yeah, that's a good segue into our next poll question. Let's pull that up real quick and take a look at that if we can. It talks about organizations. Does your organization currently have, or have they in the past funded or partnered with educational research initiatives? And okay, so the majority of the good news is that yes, most folks are saying that they have. So that's good. So as far as funding and partnering on research initiatives, what other ways, so for interested companies and individuals to get involved, besides just the monetary contribution, like, are there other ways that they can support or get involved? Like, where do you guys suggest, or like, where should they start?
Kim, to bring it kind of a little back to students, which I think we all think about a lot. We are getting hit in research, and it's impacting graduate students. It's impacting our undergraduates. But more importantly, I started with our students are, they came to our institutions to have a particular job, right? And they want a career. A lot of my students are interested in working with the Forest Service, and those don't look like they're the right opportunity right now. And so when we think about what do we need to do moving forward, like Dennis said, we need to evolve. And so it means working with our partners a little closer and a little deeper about creating pathways for our students into careers. And so when I think about private industry, or I think about our partners, we can only do so much. And so any way folks can help us make sure our students get into the jobs that they have open, that's a really important component to what we do. We all have offices that help with this, but sometimes just even knowing what's available for our students. If you haven't traditionally, worked with, one of our institutions, we're all here and able to kind of help broker those relationships between our students and the jobs that you have available.
Yeah, I agree. It all comes down to relationships that we develop with partners that are out there, and then just being super opportunistic. So one of the things that's been a real high priority for us is getting support to students for experiential learning, etc. And out of nowhere, right? So we had a Georgia graduate who plays golf professionally, and all of a sudden he bought some timberland in South Georgia and became a forestry geek, and decided to endow a big chunk of our summer camp, which we're committed, to paying 100% of the cost of our summer camp, because we don't want to lose it, and we know it's an access problem. And those opportunities come up, and you just have to be ready for them through partnerships, through relationships. That's never going to change, and probably shouldn't change. It's something we should always be dialed in on.
Awesome, thank you.
I think Todd mentioned earlier about the co-ops. That is another big opportunity for colleges. we have several co-ops, which is a kind of club model. One particular industry may not be able to advance a particular topic or something, some problem. But if if we companies come together and approach one academic institution such as Warnell or here or Dennis Place or anywhere, so that way we can leverage those kinds of resources by engaging students, as Libby pointed out. See, our number one obligation is how best we can train our students. So that would really help. We may have some resources, but these companies can pay their share. Then we can advance a lot of, like for example, for the past 50 years, we have a Southern Nursery Co-op with the industry partners. So we engage a lot of students actually to train them, from all the way from the nursery to the health of nurseries and those kinds of things. I think, that is one model, that more and more leverage can be, exploited. Yes. Mhm.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, guys, get out there and support your forestry graduate programs. Let's go to our last poll question real quick and review that. Let's talk about which of these external drivers do you think is currently impacting the natural resources industry and its related fields the most? Is it the federal budget cuts that we talked about, environmental policy changes, or advancements in technology? And right now we are neck and neck on the first two, and we have hit on I think we talked maybe about the cuts a little more than we have the policy changes. Guys, chime in here. What do you think? Oh, yeah, okay. The policy changes getting a little bit more love. Somebody jump in. Tell me what's going on. Talk to me about the policy changes. Let's touch on that some.
Depending on what part of the country, and you're probably talking, of course, about different policy changes.
There's been quite a few. Well, I think there's been, when I think about this, I think about just, again, and I'm not an expert on it by any means, but I think about just the rumblings I've been hearing on the rollbacks on related to climate change policies, or just even the elimination of, to your point, specific projects and researches related to initiatives trying to further advancements in those areas or conservation. So that's kind of where I was coming from with it. How are those affecting the programs or the curriculum?
Well, I'll start with just mentioning an environmental policy change here in Oregon that came about, was actually went into effect last year, and it was changes to the forest practice rules for the first time in a number of years, and it was a product of what was called the Private Forest Accord, which was an effort between industry stakeholders and NGOs, and trying to come up with some shared perspective on changes in the regulations around forest management. And it resulted in significant increases in stream setbacks and buffer zones along riparian corridors and steep headwall slopes and X, Y, and Z. And it's fairly complicated, actually, because it depends on whether they're fish bearing or non-fish bearing, and ephemeral or non-ephemeral. And so we're incorporating that into the curriculum, of course, and so that our students have understand those rules when they enter into the job market. But it's also a huge impact on just the where operational land on private lands, and so it ends up resulting in about a 10% reduction in total forest timber harvest. And we in the state of Oregon have a forest harvest tax that helps fund education and research in the forest forest sciences. And so that funds the Forest Research Laboratory that you mentioned when you introduced me. And so these have direct and very real impacts on research, even though it is a laudable change in the forest practice rules for the state based on an environmental policy change. So that's just a really tangible example of how it can directly affect or indirectly affect education.
Yeah, but budget cuts may be kind of, sometimes, short-term impacts will be there, but environmental policies, they will have long-term impacts. Like, for example, if you look at 2000s and those things, bioenergy policies really, drove so many academic institutions to launch, major bachelor's degrees, certificates, all kinds of, the research. So much work has been done because of bioenergy policies that were in place in 2000, mid 2000s or something. But the same thing, the climate policies are going to drive significant portion of our research platforms. The policies are moving targets. Depending upon they stay or they change, or we have to recalibrate, and those things are going to give opportunities for us to recalibrate our academic and research programs.
Gotcha. Great. And I think the reality is, just like, again, everything we've talked about, and again, this theme of change keeps coming up throughout the conversation. Just like in every other facet of life, change is constant, right? So whether it's adapting to these new regulations that are coming out and these policies that are changing as the administrations are changing over the years, or integrating these new technologies that we've talked about and restructuring how we teach or how we communicate this information to these new generations, right? This change is going to be inevitable. And with that said, I want to get some very final thoughts, and then I know we're running short on time, so I want to skip over to Q&A after this, but I want to get a last note from you guys just real quick on your advice for how to plan for this. Again, knowing that change is inevitable, how do you guys plan for this, for success, for your departments, for your schools, for your programs, and for your students? How do you set them up for success in a world of change?
I'll start this. I go back to a couple of things that have already been said. One is partnerships, keeping strong connections with a broad group of stakeholders that are friends of your institution is essential, because that way you undergo change together in that way. And of course, keeping and attracting and keeping great people that are capable of making those adaptations. And to Joniki's point, we try not to trade off each other's silviculturists, because we start cannibalizing each other, and which is not good. But the more we can produce and put great people in different institutions and keep them, the better. So those are two things I think that help keep us resilient.
Great. Thank you, Todd. Anyone else?
I'd just echo the partnership piece that Todd just mentioned. We are fortunate to have really generous supporters. A lot of them are our alums, and as well as just friends of the college, a number of industry supporters, and that has greatly they make it possible for students to attend OSU. We give away about $900,000 in scholarships annually, and they also engage with us through the co-ops, as Janaki and Todd mentioned, and those partnerships are super important for making available funding for graduate students to do research in very practical and applied sort of spaces that would be potentially hard to get funded on a more traditional federal research platform. And so I would really support that notion that those partnerships are going to be really important going forward, and we're going to have to expand those partnerships as we look to private foundations to recognize the value of forestry as not only providing human resource needs, but as a conservation practice on the landscape in many locations and instances where it's not recognized necessarily as conservation, but it absolutely meets those conservation objectives and provides resources for human needs.
Thank you, Tom.
You know, Kim, it's easy, you know, of course, I'll echo partnerships, everything else that has been said, but it's also really easy to get mired down in what's happening. And, you know, we teach adaptation, we teach collaboration, we teach these principles in our classrooms. And I'm often reminding and reflecting with our faculty, like, we have to practice those things. We have to innovate. We have to keep moving forward every single day. Because these students, if the students see us kind of swirling in a place that's not productive, they also start getting down. And so you know, for whatever it's worth, yeah, we should create partnerships and everything else, but we should also self-reflect and make sure that we're innovating and adapting and changing. And the best way to do that I know, is just a lot of laughter and a lot of fun. And so I think reminding us all that,
Yeah,
you know,
we're human, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you, Libby. Okay, let's go start Q&A real quick, because I know we're running short on time, and see what has come through from our audience members. All right, let me see. I've got a question here. It says, any programs incorporating One Health in their programs for the environmental factor?
Yeah, I'll just say quickly, and I responded, I think, to this in the chat. You know, at the University of Idaho, we're thinking about One Health very directly in a wildfire sense. You know, it's crops and commodities, livestock, human health, as well as forests and range health. So it is I wouldn't say it's necessarily a framing that resonates with current funders, but it is a really constructive way of thinking about something like wildfire that really affects so many different places.
At Auburn, I mentioned in the note, actually, at Auburn we have a One Health graduate certificate. It's a partnership based. Actually, our college contributes from the environmental health perspective. College of Vet Med contributes from the animal health perspective, and public health department from University of Alabama, Birmingham contribute from human health perspective. So it's a kind of joint partnership, and we are moving. We have launched, I think, 5-6 years ago, One Health graduate certificate.
I've got a question here about AI and how your universities view AI, ChatGPT or Gemini, et cetera, in the classroom. Do you see it pulling students away? Do you think it's bringing down the cost of undergraduate or graduate degree? Thoughts on AI in the classroom?
Yeah, I think every institution and every discipline is is working through how to teach, with AI as a reality. And I think, most places are, accepting it as something that students use and are going to use. And so then how do we actually integrate it into the curriculum? That's going to be a chore, right? I mean, I was in grad school when, when the internet started, and it fundamentally changed how we run, written exams for PhD students, right? And we still have the oral side to double check. So, it's like a lot of things, like changes in funding, changes in technology disrupt how we teach and how we work, and they generally lead to more efficient work, and it generally makes it harder for us to teach, or we have to adjust. And so that is just a constant thing. But I think anybody that's resisting it is at their own peril. I think you really need to dive into it and figure out how to use it for good.
Okay. Oh, go ahead.
No, absolutely. I completely agree with you, Todd, that it's part of the fabric of education now, and we just have to learn how to work with it and advance it for for good and for achieving things in a way that we wouldn't have been able to achieve without it. So it is absolutely part of our future, and so we need to be teaching it and working with it.
Awesome.
The
Okay.
only concern I have is it's great, the technology is going to make us more efficient, faster, whatnot. But I hear from my faculty members quite often, in the face of these growing social media gadgets, the attention span of students is declining. How best we can ensure that they understand the concepts, they analyze the concepts, and they successfully apply, because the technologies, of course, they are going to enhance that process, but they still need to have some kind of, concepts. But when information is available readily in Google, sometimes they have a tendency, okay, we don't need to learn because it is right there. Okay. I think, that is going to be one of the challenges for us, how best we can successfully train these students. And it goes back to the communication poll that you showed us, because if these people are very efficient in texting, that's not going to cut it to write a paper or, write a memo or something in the business world.
Awesome. Okay, really quick. Let's see if we can make this a one-word answer or response. Which students are the most employable?
3 words: hungry, humble, hardworking.
I like it.
With good communication skills.
That's right.
I don't know,
All right.
hardworking.
Okay, all the H's, guys. Humble, hardworking. Okay, great. Awesome. Okay, I know that we're coming toward the end. Guys, I know you have so many more questions. We're going to try to get these out to our panelists afterwards and maybe put these out on our LinkedIn or in a different video or something for you afterwards. I don't know about you guys, but I feel like I've been definitely schooled today on forest canopies and classrooms and what's going on and the latest and greatest. I am so thankful to all of our panelists for being here today. Y'all were amazing. Thank you for sharing your insights with us. Best of luck to everybody as we go into this new fall semester that's just around the corner. Hopefully some cooler temperatures coming with it for everybody too, as it seems like we're all kind of sweating right now. Anyway, I hope you guys have found this informative and enjoyable. Until next time, we will see y'all. Thank you for joining today. We'll talk soon. Bye, guys.
Bye.